now, with our annual Fireside Chat, TAG President and CEO, Mr. Tino Mantella.
Thanks. Alan, I think for the audience, one thing that we see in the tech community here is, here's a guy that within 20 years has helped to build 2 companies and create over 5,000 jobs, well-paying jobs, really driving economic impact for the state of Georgia. I think that deserves a round of applause.
Thank you.
So we were in your film there was talking about innovation, and I think you're known for innovation. And our speaker before lunch, many people had a chance to hear Hal Gregerson, and he asked us if it's nature or nurture. And I know that you have 5 brothers. You're the youngest of the clan, and so you had a close family. So what was it for you?
Well, let me start with 3 of my brothers actually have worked with me in companies over the course of that, and some of them are still talking to me, so that's good. You know, I'm just a firm believer that there's no general rule to success. You know, I just happened to have the TV on the other day, and I saw the Christian Laettner thing on ESPN, and they talk about why I hate Christian Laettner, which is kind of a funny way of presenting your life story. But he talked about his brother that beat him up all the time. Well, you know, God bless, I had 5 brothers beating me up all the time. I wrestled as a means of survival. You know, I think that there was a lot of shaping in my family. And yet, my dad was not entrepreneurial. My dad was an attorney in the military. But he was home at 5:30 every day. That's what was important to him. And yet, a good friend of mine, his father owned a company. And when I was in some formative years, I saw that and I said, gee, you know, so I was able to take mentorship from a different direction. But my 5 older brothers are all very successful. And whatever my mom and dad did, you know, my mom was probably the one you would have thought was in the military based on the way our family ran. She kept the clocks running on time, and she was a tough woman. As I heard someone say once, tough woman when she was well. You know, when she was having a bad day, it was even worse. She definitely kept us all in line. And I've got a brother who is my oldest brother, an A6 pilot. You know, there's a couple lawyers in the group. So to see 6 boys that all did well, it was a very important part of my growing up.
And they wanted you to go to medical school, and I know you started out in chemistry, but then switched. What happened with that?
Well, so my senior year in college, my father had a heart attack, and I ended up spending a lot of time in the hospital with him, and he ended up passing away from that. And that's one of those moments in your life when you take stock and say, is this really what I want to do? Is this what I wanted, or was this what he wanted? And I would have been a horrible doctor. I don't have a great bedside manner. You can ask any of those 5,000 employees when I'm having a bad day what it's like. And it was one of those moments where I took stock in what I wanted to do. I ended up having kind of a gap year, if you will, but took computer science classes. Interestingly, I had gotten through chemistry, and you know, this is the early 80s, so I'd gotten all through college without ever touching a computer. And I always think of that moment in The Graduate when the man says, you know, plastics. You know, I had a feeling these computer things weren't going away, and I better know a little bit about them. So I ended up taking a few classes in computer science and sort of fell in love with that, and ended up getting a master's in finance, but ended up teaching a class in computer science while I was doing that. And then getting out of school altogether, got into computers. And it was probably the first time in my life where I can say I really fell in love with my job. It didn't feel like a job. And I think that became that dedication and tenacity to go build something.
Tenacity is a great word. Leads to my next question. So I know you were in sports in high school, and actually in your regular season in senior year, you were undefeated in wrestling, a sport that's dear to my own heart. And so the question is, did tenacity come from the sports, or did you bring tenacity into the sport?
You know, it's one of those, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And I think it really comes back to what I think is that prevailing thought in my life is that there's lots of ways to be successful. In business, I see people that are really smart that are successful, but I see people that are really, really smart that aren't. They can't manage people. I see people that are pretty smart, but really tenacious. I see people that are very outgoing. I see people that are very shy and introverted, but they overcome those weaknesses. And I think I was not a great athlete. Of the six brothers, I was hardly the best, but I ended up being the most successful when you look at records. And I think there was just a day later in my high school career, I didn't have a great sort of freshman, sophomore, even an okay junior year, but I said my junior year, my God, I could be good at this if I really tried, and I dug in. And I think it was the lesson that I learned was how effort and results pay into each other. Bobby Knight has a great expression where he says, every player I ever coached had the will to win, very few had the will to practice to win. And I think in entrepreneurship, I see so many individuals that go out and start companies, and sometimes when I hear them talk about it, it just sounds like a get-rich-quick scheme. It sounds like I want to go ring the brass bell, but what I don't want to do is take out the trash and do the hard work and do the day-to-day and work 18 hours a day and take no money out of the business and do all the stuff that it really takes to lead a group of people. Because they're all watching you, and if you buy the big car and you come in at 9 and you want to be the great manager and the great visionary, well, that works for some people. Again, a lot of ways to be successful, but less often than not.
So in college, you did some pivoting in college, actually. So you did chemistry, you did some computer programming, you ended up with MBA in finance, but then you decided somewhere along the line that teaching might be something important, and you actually taught a class. And what was the rationale behind that?
Well, I go back and say I was a pretty shy person, and I said, who are the people that can actually get up in front of a group and feel comfortable? And it's people in the clergy who get up and do it every day. It's teachers who get up and do it every day. And so I got into my master's program and said, I want to develop that skill. And how do you do it? Well, even if you go out and get into a speaking club, you only do it so much. And I was really qualified to teach absolutely nothing in the business school. I had taken a little bit of programming. I had never taken Fortran before. And yet I went and taught a Fortran class to the freshman students. And I was literally just staying about one chapter ahead of the book. And there were kids in this class that knew far more about Fortran programming than I did. And they would ask a question because they knew it. And my pat answer was always, well, we'll take care of that in office hours. Come see me at 4 o'clock after class and we'll handle that question. So I learned how to dodge and weave in front of a group of kids that were, some of them smarter than I was about that subject.
I guess it really helped you moving forward just in terms of applying that to business and being able to...
It was really getting over that fear of getting in front of even a medium-sized group of people. There's nothing harder than being in front of 30 quote-unquote freshman kids in college. If you can capture that audience, heck, anything in business is nothing compared to that.
So in between Manhattan and AirWatch, you decided to sail off into the 7 seas, I guess, for a couple years. What was the rationale in terms of doing that? And then, I was thinking about that. I'm sure you had a lot of time for reflection during that period of time.
Well, the answer to that question is why not?
Yeah.
I mean, for God's sakes. So I had just gotten married. And we had just had our first child. And actually, we had done a little bit of boating, and my wife and I weren't big boaters from our history, but we had started doing a little bit, and honestly, this boat sort of found us, and it was a bigger boat than we had ever considered that we would ever buy. The interesting thing was that it was bought by someone else at an 82-cent euro when the euro was at $1.20. So this was like this phone call out of the blue that says, great deal if you can move quick. Now, there's no great deal on a boat, let's face that.
I'll tell you about the gas.
But at the end of the day, I brought this idea to my wife, and she's like, are you kidding? I'm pregnant. We're having a baby. Are you crazy? And I actually looked at her and I said, no, I'm not, because this is the perfect time. It's now we're in 20 years. And we literally brought a 6-month-old baby onto a boat. And lived on it for 2 years, and it was just a fantastic experience. And I'm going to say there are more people in life that have those opportunities to do those kinds of things that don't take them. And we just seized it. We seized that moment of, I wanted some time between kind of the first company and doing something else. And we could have just hung out and done nothing. But to take that opportunity and see the world and spend time with each other, lots of reflection, and really recharging the battery to go out and have the opportunity to go out and do it again. Don't regret a day of it.
Do you think if you didn't do the 2 years in the boat that you would have ended up doing AirWatch?
You know, those are those what-if questions. You know, I don't spend a lot of time looking back and saying, was this the defining moment of this and this and this and this? You know, the funny story is that John Marshall, my ultimate partner, ended up visiting me on the boat several times, and it kind of kept us close because it was a great environment for him to come see me. I remember when we were down in Sicily, and we were just getting ready to wrap up the trip, and he came and he said, Alan, my real reason for coming out here was I need some business advice. And he said, I'm in a fight with my partner. He said, you know, I want to build this business, and he sort of wants to work for 6 weeks and earn a little bit of money and take 6 weeks off, and we're just not getting along. So I gave him some advice on how to separate the company. It didn't work. I gave him some more advice on how to separate the company, and that didn't work. And I realized I'm not really good at giving advice. So I went to him and said, John, it's 2 of you. You've got, you know, 50 coffee shops that use Wi-Fi, and this is not a difficult business to separate. Why don't you go to him and get a number, don't tell him I'm involved, and I'll become your silent partner. And ended up buying out his partner for, you know, a very, very small number. This is probably one of the greatest venture deals of all time if you look at it like that. And that is sort of what got me involved in thinking that I was just going to be a silent partner. And next thing I knew, it was just such an interesting business. We found so many ways to go that the rest was history. Now, you know, would we have gotten together otherwise? Who knows how little things in your life create those course of sequences of events. But God knows I've been blessed to have a lot of great sequence of events in my life.
You know, one of the things I think that defines a great entrepreneur is the ability to be able to see change and make that change. I think one thing is they may see the change, but then it's a whole nother thing if they have so much vested in what the original company was to not move. And I was amazed at both of your companies when you listen to the story, is what you started out with at the beginning isn't what it ended up being. And you seem like you have that knack to make change at the right time. So you can talk in general about that, but also I say, is that instinct? Because a lot of leaders lead by instinct, or is it a lot of data?
No, it's instinct. I don't believe. I've never put a business plan together. I never said this is where you end up. I think Jim Collins has the great analogy where he says it's like getting people on a bus. If you have a bus that says it's going to Chicago and you put Chicago on the top and a bunch of people jump on the bus and you end up in Cleveland, you have a lot of really unhappy people on your hands. If you say, look, you know, we're going to get on this bus and we don't know where we're going to end up, but we're going to have a great time getting there. And you're right, in both companies, there were pivots. And you know, there's big pivots and little pivots in life. And they both had pretty big ones, but they had tons and tons of little ones. You know, and I use the analogy in growing businesses, it's a little like slalom skiing. I think of a great slalom skier goes down and thinks he knows every mogul he's going to hit the way down, he will fall halfway. You can't ski like that. You can't, in technology, you can't plan that far ahead. You go down really fast and you hit the first one, and based on what you feel, you hit the second one. Based on what you feel, you figure out how to get to the third one. And if you try to figure out 50 of them in advance, you either go very slowly or you fall. But you'll never be successful at winning the gold medal.
So show of hands on this one. Ellen has said that there's no such business as a bad business. How many people agree with that? Not too many people raise their hands, so go ahead and make the case for that. Put you on the spot.
Well, I think it gets back to that pivot. I mean, look, you've got to be generally in an okay business.
Right.
So, you know, whether you say you're going into robotics today, there's going to be winners and losers. If you go into retail today, there's going to be winners and losers. And the point is that it doesn't matter where you start. The beautiful thing about business is you get to define your business's strategy and rules, and you get to keep changing that. I mean, you think of, you know, everybody overuses Apple as an analogy, but you think of Steve Jobs coming back and being told that you've got the second best PC operating system in the world with a company with 200 crappy products that are losing money, and that sounds like a really crappy environment to go into, and yet he rallied kind of what are our assets and which direction do we go? And I'm a firm believer that every day you stay in business, you've got a chance to redefine that story. You know, there's the classic old joke that if you don't want to lose, don't play tennis against Andre Agassi. What that means is it doesn't say if you don't want to lose at tennis. It's if you don't want to lose, you get to define your game. And step one in business is become a monopoly. Figure out how do you scale your opportunity down to where you are going to be the best in the world. And I don't care if you're the best sandwich shop in a 3-block area, and that's how far people want to walk. If you can't own your 3-block area of serving sandwiches, you can't become Subway. You're not going to become a big business at it. So I think there's, every business that's in business today, given that you write the rules, you write the next chapter, you can pivot the business, you change and I'm not saying go 90 degrees to what you're doing, but in any business, I don't think there's more than a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 degree change that doesn't become a big opportunity because you see the world differently.
So one of the areas that you've done a deeper dive in, certainly have a lot of knowledge in, is the area of mobility, which is changing quickly. What's the biggest challenge you see companies facing today when it comes to mobile, and how are companies using mobile technology to innovate business processes?
Oh, I mean, boy, this is 2 hours by itself. I'm so excited about where mobile is headed. You ask for a show of hands, of who has a mobile phone, and the answer is going to be everybody. This is going to be the remote control of your life. First of all, in business, we've gone, or we're really in the process of going beyond where it's email and the basics. You think about the internet, and there was the period where everybody kind of felt that the internet was in the frenzy of 98, 99, 2000. But when you really think about where it affected the economy, it was when businesses really integrated the internet into their supply chain and into the way they do business with other businesses. And the big economic values were in 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, this expansion of using it to transfer data, and that really hard work of screwing that new technology into businesses. So I think we've gotten past the first phase of everybody has a phone. When we talk to VCs and talk to other entrepreneurial companies about where's the next phase of this going, it's screwing mobile into the businesses. And we just had our Connect event in Barcelona at the Mobile World Congress, and it was one of the operator of the channel, or one of the tunnels in Europe. And they said, we have a situation where we reduced the cost of repairs to 1/10 of what it was before by using mobile. What used to take people going out on the tracks, finding the problem, writing up a work order, getting it in, very long time later, somebody came back and did the fix. And they said, we took it down to 10% of the time and the effort that it was before implementing mobile. I think there are so many business ideas where companies are starting to figure out, not the simple of email, but how do we really take mobile technology and take it where we change people's jobs? We were talking to a global soft drink company the other day, and they talked about internationally the way they're doing what I'll call Uberification of the entire delivery network. Anywhere in the world, it used to be that a little kiosk with Coke or soda or pop or Pepsi or whatever, if they ran out, they ran out for the day. Now they can pick up a smartphone, hit a button, one button, and there's 20 delivery people driving around on scooters with a certain amount of soda on the back to restock. I mean, these are where you realize that on a global scale, the ability to re-engineer the way we do business with mobile, and this doesn't even get into the Internet of Things and the next generation of that technology.
So I have several more questions, but if there's some people with burning questions, I think we'd probably be able to take 2 or 3. Go to the microphones, and Frank, if we could or raise the lights a little bit so we can see the microphones, that would be great. But I'll ask a question while people are thinking. If not, I have plenty of questions. So
I'm more prepared for yours than theirs.
I know. Manhattan went public, and of course, AirWatch was sold. So were you always confident about the decisions made at the right time for the right amount, if you will? And so basically, how did you know it was the right time to pull the trigger?
In both instances, you never know. You never know the future outcome. But at Manhattan Associates, we knew that it was the right time for us to go public. And interestingly, I had actually structured the company in a way that it was difficult to take it public. It was not the right. I never thought I would take a company public, and I didn't think we ever needed it. We were such an unbelievably profitable company. And again, I talked about a friend of mine and a mentor. Well, they had owned that business for 30 years, and that was my view of the world. And yet circumstances changed. For credibility, you needed to be a public company. And I pulled my partners together and said, look, we've got a lot of upside going public, a lot of downside by not doing it. And one thing about software companies is they've got to scale. They've got to market. The side of the road is littered with technology, the carcasses of technology companies that were great product companies, but they didn't grow, scale, market, and be visible. And so I felt that it was a defining moment for Manhattan Associates to get that public awareness. You know, here we are, this Atlanta company, everything else is happening on the West Coast. And it was absolutely the right move. The only mistaken move I ever made was selling a share of this $15 stock that today trades at $210 a share or some incredible number. At AirWatch, when we saw our future and how quickly we had grown in the market, we really felt that when VMware came in, and we said no to every other company. I mean, we were being asked constantly. We were the 800-pound gorilla in a market everybody knew was exploding. And we used the opportunity to talk to these companies to tell them, A, why they shouldn't compete with us. We had won the market. And B, that they should partner with us because we were the only company worthy of partnership. And as we got to know VMware and understood what they had in the assets of end user computing and the fact that there was this merger going on between what is a desktop and what is a phone and what is Internet of Things, we really felt that their global presence and their other assets were important, and we felt that that was the right thing. And we felt it was a real win for our employees, whom all of which had an awful lot of equity in the company. Benefits were better. So we were able to take this moment in time and really uplift all of our employees in a way that would have taken years and years to do had we done it any other way. So we just felt it was the right time. And again, this is a situation where a year later, they're wildly happy with us, we're wildly happy with them, and I'm told that doesn't happen that often. So something went right.
And the other good thing about that is they seem to have made a strong commitment to Atlanta.
Very much so. When we knew that going in, if we had been a 300 or 400 person company, they could have sucked us up into the machine and maybe we would have disappeared. But at 1,500 people and now growing to 2,000 people, even they recognize having a bigger center outside of Atlanta is an advantage. You've heard me say it 100 times that I think every employee's got 3 job offers by lunch in Silicon Valley. Having some diversity of where R&D and where things are being done is a real advantage to them. So they're very committed to Georgia Tech. We're building liaisons there. They're investing into R&D there with us. So they're making a big commitment into Atlanta, and we knew that they were going to do that going in.
You spoke a couple of years ago at Venture Atlanta. I know Allison Eman here, who's the executive director, doing a great job there, and some of our board members are here. And there's a quote that I re-looked up, but I had sort of remembered what you had said in this regard, and I'll quote you. It says, find something, and this was to the entrepreneurs, find something you do well and put your heart into it. Master it, end of quotes. So I take it that if you're talking to an audience of entrepreneurs, you think that sometimes maybe they're not focused enough on a particular thing that they should be doing?
Well, I think it's which entrepreneur. I think the successful ones are wildly committed. I talk about, I just do talk to some of them that I feel like they're playing at business. They're not doing business. This quote, every player has the will to win, not the will to practice to win. And our companies, we've always started small and with getting into companies quickly. And even if we have to give our technology away, we're going to learn. We treat nickels like manhole covers. At AirWatch, nobody had a title really until we went through the acquisition and we sort of became part of VMware. We didn't want people worried about what kind of chair did they sit in, what kind of desk did they have, what type of an office were they going to get. It was all about building product and building the company and building value for our customers. And not that there are not a lot of entrepreneurs out there doing that, but I do believe there's a handful that when I see them, I think that they've got other priorities. And people talk about big rounds of venture, look, venture money is to some extent debt. Listen, if you want to, get a lot of money or get a big valuation, go raise a lot of money. You have to pay that back. And so I see sometimes more energy in fundraising and some other areas than that maniacal focus on building product and building value for customers.
Let's see.
I got it. I'm in the middle of the room.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Hey, Michael. 6'8", I can see you.
I have a question, but then I'll also pass the mic for anybody that's interested. Alan, you've done a great job of building some cultures that people want to go to. And I think everybody here struggles to find workers. Can you talk a little bit about that part of the business and the building of the culture that attracts people?
Sure. First of all, I've always had the philosophy there's 3 kinds of people in the world. There's the ones that if you ask them to do something, they can't do it. And nobody wants those people. So they're easy to find. There's the people that if you tell them what to do, they're going to do a pretty good job of doing it. But you've got to tell them. And there's a third type that you point them in the right direction, they're going to figure that out. And to some extent, it's how you create the environment for that third type of person and making sure you don't hire too many people that don't have that vision with you. And so what we do is we create a really fun environment. We generally create a pretty young environment. We do a lot of campus recruiting. Even the senior people we bring in, they feel re-energized because you've got this young, vibrant organization that's usually just, I've been blessed that both my organizations have exploded in terms of size and numbers and value creation and customers. And so people get really energized in that environment. And so suddenly people are doing things they didn't even think they could do before. The second thing we haven't done is a lot of acquisition, because sometimes you inherit these cultures of companies that have been sort of just okay. And you've got a nucleus that feeds itself. So the fact that we've grown generally organically, hiring people, building our own products, not bringing in ulterior cultures, but putting them in this environment where people feel really, really empowered. We want people to ask for forgiveness, not permission to do things within reason. Don't get me wrong. We want people to feel like they're learning so much on their own, but they've always got mentorship. They've always got someone they can turn to who knows the answer or can give them the tools that they need. They're not left to just, here's a project, go figure it out, we're gonna leave you alone. No, there's always someone there that if you need the help, you can get it, but if you can figure it out on your own. And when you're going from 100 to 1,500 people, you can't tell everybody what to do every minute, every day. You need them to go out and figure some of it out, but knowing they've got the resources. And creating those environments has been really successful for both companies.
I'll be glad to pass the microphone. Here we go.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Earlier, Bob mentioned, you either be disrupt or you be disrupted, kill or be killed kind of thing.
We prefer the killing in our side of it.
Well,
we work hard on the first chapter.
Sure, absolutely. So in your either short-term or long-term strategy or whatever, where in your priority or approach do you think I gotta, look over my shoulder and see who's, doing it better than I am, or do you just keep going forward and doing what Well,
those aren't mutually exclusive. I mean, we're always looking forward, playing our game, but we're always looking over our shoulder. Only the paranoid survive. Do we have the rallying cry of, do we have competitors? And obviously in all of our businesses we did. Did we try to redefine what we did? We had much bigger players in warehouse management than Manhattan Associates was when we started. And yet we went into certain niches that we could dominate. So apparel, the fact that we were doing style, color, size. And in our direct competitors, we had a company called Red Prairie or McHugh Freeman. And boy, they sold a project to Nike that almost put them out of business. Trying to do style, color, size just killed them. It was the greatest deal we ever lost. And we watched that. We clearly competed with Oracle and SAP. And while they did great in certain simplistic environments, we knew that we were in the complicated warehouses. So we defined the markets that we could win in and continued to expand from there. At AirWatch, we had other competitors as well, and we watched them very closely. And we used that information that we knew in competitive situations. When today at AirWatch being 2,000 employees and our biggest competitor is 600 or 700, we think. Do we use that internally to say, guys, as well as externally to customers, size and scale matters in technology. You want the company that the technology ecosystem wants to be working with. You want the company that's got the largest install base, the largest relationship with the device manufacturers. And all of this sort of feeds into itself. So watching your competitors and driving your strategy forward aggressively and in your own direction, those are not mutually exclusive.
One more question. So we have time for one more, and then I have a couple more to wrap it up.
Thank you. So the question is, a lot of entrepreneurs are struggle with risk mitigation, and it seems to hamper their abilities to move forward. So earlier you mentioned intuition is what you rely on. How do the two interplay?
Well, there's the old saying of, some people think entrepreneurs are risk takers, but the statistics show entrepreneurs aren't. They're generally the most conservative people you will ever meet. I do not take risks. I'm not a VC. By the time anybody comes to me asking for money, they've gone down a list of 10,000 people that started with Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins, 9,900 more names. And suddenly, if they're asking Alan Dabbiere, they've been said no to an awful lot. Entrepreneurs every day mitigate risk. It's how much investment do I make and when do I make it? How many people do I hire? When do I hit the gas? When do I hit the brake? When do I move into new markets? When do I pivot from software into SaaS? What is my architecture? Every decision you make is life and death, because you make a wrong architecture decision, as I've seen some of our competitors do, and it kills them. You develop and go on premise and you don't write that multi-tenancy for SaaS, and you're dead as a business today, all because of a bad architectural decision that by the time you fix the technology, the race has already been run and won by somebody else. And so, entrepreneurs are generally the successful ones, are the most thoughtful, conservative thinkers. The risks that they take are on themselves, but they really evaluate the risk reward of every decision made, because any one of them that's wrong is going to put you out of business or hinder you or slow you down. So again, as a company, we grew that quickly in these two companies, not because it was reckless abandon. With Manhattan Associates, we went from 0 or a startup to 30 people in 5 years. That was very conservative growth. We knew exactly what we were doing, wildly profitable. And when we put our foot down, we knew why we were putting our foot down. We knew that we had something, we had a market. We weren't just hiring people because we thought the business would come. We knew where it was. AirWatch, the same thing. It took us from 2006 to 2010 to get to the first 100 people. And 70 of them were in the legacy Wi-Fi business. Right. So suddenly, we knew exactly what we were doing when we put our foot down. And so, again, back to the point of, it wasn't a risk. We were weighing the investment and the value and the risk benefit every day.
So those of you that know Alan as well as I do know that he's probably one of the top 10 promoters of Atlanta in the country. And not just here, but I think anywhere you go, you're promoting Atlanta, and thank you for that. I think it's really done a lot for the whole metropolitan Atlanta area and the state of Georgia. Can we do more as a community to be promoters of Georgia and Atlanta?
Well, look, the best way to be a promoter of Atlanta is to keep winning, keep building businesses. I think we do a good job. People try to compare us to Silicon Valley, and the first thing we have to do is not compare ourselves to Silicon Valley. They do what they do, and they do it in a different way. And back to one of my main points is there's a lot of ways to be successful. When I look at the rich history that Atlanta has in technology, when I look at the size of the technology community here, it's a different kind of technology community. The fact that you've got companies like Mercedes-Benz and moving down, and Porsche is down here, and what that's going to do to the Internet of Things. When I look at what Georgia Tech has here and the number of people they're putting in, the Robotics Institute. We've got to build more of a robotics ecosystem here so we keep those great, talented minds here in the community. Money is going to flow where great ideas are. When we went out for capital, we didn't have any problem getting money from all over the country. There's nothing more movable than money. And it will find great opportunities, and it will find great entrepreneurs. So look, I think Atlanta just has to continue doing more of what they're doing. Celebrate with things like this, the people that are moving and building and creating companies, get exposure to those companies. Like I said, I am confident I could never have built the two companies that I built in any other community in the world. What was here, the foundations that had been laid, the people, the airport, the infrastructure of the city, the attorney and legal community, everything, all the ingredients are here. Now what we have to do is get more cooks in the kitchen, making really wonderful recipes.
So I couldn't wrap up without saying, you're still a young guy, so what's next for you?
Well, look, I've got one more year at least at VMware trying to make sure this integration goes well and make sure that we continue to make this the mobile capital of the world. In terms of what's next, there are so many great things that are going on out there, and if anybody has any ideas, I'm open. I'm a great partner. So I think this is such an exciting time in technology. I'm really focused right now on making sure VMware gets great value out of AirWatch, and but boy, I think there's a huge, let's just say I'm more confident that there's going to be a third one after having two successful runs than I was probably that there'd even have been a second one after a first, because you sort of start to realize that there's a recipe to doing this. There's a formula. And gee, maybe you're pretty good at this stuff.
And it's going to be in Atlanta, right?
And it's going to be here in
All right.
Atlanta. That's the,
Let's give him a great round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Al. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Great. So I'd like to ask Barry McCarthy to join me on stage, and we'll wrap it up. Barry, it's been another great summit, record fundraising, record crowd, great speakers. And do you want to?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, we've gotten to that time where we get to look back and say what a terrific day we've had, what an amazing day, incredible set of speakers, and what a way to wrap up hearing from Alan and the great story about the success he's had here in the greater Atlanta community. Special thanks to Jim Chen with Tesla, John Rossman with Alvarez and Marsal, and Hal Gregerson at MIT. I just think it was a blockbuster day. I do want to pause and say before we wrap up, we want to thank our sponsors. Of course, without our sponsors, this event couldn't happen at all. And the platinum sponsors this year were Cardlytics, Cherry Bakert, our own First Data, JBN Consulting. The gold sponsors were Aaron's, Alpharetta Technology Commission, AirWatch, Process Weaver, Sun Technologies, and Verizon. And the silver sponsors were ASAP, Blackbaud, Earthlink, Equifax, Fiserv, GE, the Georgia Research Alliance, Halo, McKesson, NCR, PGI, PwC, State Farm, and Vonage. And of course, lots of bronze sponsors as well. So behind the scenes for an event like this to come off, of course, you've already heard that the importance of the TAG staff and how the TAG staff pulls together to make this happen. Really, no one gets more credit than Tino for all the great work he's doing. But this year, the sponsor or the leader or the chairman of this event was John Trainer, who you've heard from a couple of times today. And we'd like to invite John to come up so we can provide him some recognition and thank you for this great event. John, come on up.
Thanks, buddy. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So with that, I have the honor to say thank you all for being here, and we look forward to seeing you next year, and look forward to great things to come for Atlanta and the technology community. Thank you for being here.